The high-stakes telephone call between Presidents Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden is underway, and we will, of course, continue to track all updates. Let's now get you up to date with what has happened so far in the conflict. It seems like the United States has taken quite an aggressive stance. It is taking all precautions before the imminent threat of invasion becomes a reality. Washington has urged all its citizens to leave Ukraine. All non-emergency staffers in its Kiev embassy were asked to leave. And now, the Pentagon has also withdrawn most of its troops that were stationed in Ukraine. All this comes after Washington warned that the invasion can happen within days. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin spoke with the Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu. It has still not been disclosed what was discussed, but the talks revolved mainly around the military buildup by Russia around Ukraine. The French president spoke to his Russian counterpart over a phone call. It is now being said that the talks went on for nearly 1 hour and 40 minutes. And the French President Emmanuel Macron made it clear that dialogue and escalation cannot go hand in hand. If Russia wants to take the path of diplomacy, it will have to stop amassing troops near the Ukrainian border. Vladimir Putin, in response, has accused the West of using the invasion to provoke speculation. Several other nations, apart from the United States, have urged their citizens to leave Ukraine. In the latest, Germany's foreign ministry has advised all its nationals to consider leaving, while the United Kingdom has urged for the same, saying that in case of a Russian military action against Ukraine, the British embassy in Kiev will not be able to provide consular assistance. Japan issued an advisory asking its nationals to leave Ukraine immediately. Israel, too, is now evacuating its embassy staff and their families from Ukraine. Israel also called on its citizens to consider leaving the country and asked them to register with the ministry online. While Australia and New Zealand also have asked their citizens to leave Ukraine immediately as tensions soar. Western nations and Russia are now struggling to find a headway or some kind of breakthrough in the crisis. Russia has more than 100,000 troops surrounding Ukraine. It says that it has no plans to invade Ukraine, however, but the West is wary. I earlier spoke to Fred Fleitz, the vice chair of the America First Policy Institute Center for American Security and the former NSC chief of staff, where he talked about Zelensky's appeal to the Ukrainian public to keep calm amid Western warnings of an imminent invasion. Listen into his inputs.
Well, I have to say, just a few days ago, I thought that maybe the Russian buildup was a bluff, that Putin had done this for leverage to divide NATO, get concessions, undermine American leadership. But I think that the pace of the troop buildup, the fact that tanks are actually on the road driving to the Ukrainian border, and also the way Putin, as you said in your introduction, the way Putin met with and basically dismissed French and British officials, I think the case is pretty strong that Putin is not interested in dialogue. He's not interested in concessions. He is interested in mounting a major invasion of Ukraine. I think the world has to work to try to change his mind, but I'm afraid Putin probably is not going to change his mind.
Now, WION's team has been in Kiev in Ukraine, bringing you all the latest updates, especially from very sensitive zones. Our executive editor, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, has now sent us this report from Ground Zero in Kiev. Listen in.
There's no denying that. We've seen the kind of shuttle diplomacy that we saw all of this week. Olaf Scholz going to Washington, D.C., Emmanuel Macron coming here in Kiev before he after he went to Moscow, in fact, and then he went to Berlin. We've seen talks. The Russians say that they are going to raise NATO deployments at the United Nations Security Council on the 17th of February. So the Europeans are talking. The Europeans are also, some countries at least, like Denmark, changing their policy to allow American troops to be stationed in their country. The Slovak government, despite all the protests and the scenes in parliament that we saw, has allowed American troops to be stationed in 2 Air Force bases for the next 10 years. Free of charge. So European countries are gearing up because they feel that if today it's Ukraine, tomorrow it could be one of them, especially countries in Eastern Europe. So this pressure building tactic of Moscow could backfire if it wants NATO to be away from its borders. It may be pushing the countries on its periphery to do the very opposite and go closer to NATO as these countries seek security guarantees. If they do not want to live under the shadow of Russia, they will need a powerful guarantor like the NATO, like the European Union, or like the Americans. The European bloc is divided in the sense that some governments are not very keen to be on board and they do not fight what they call America's war, like we heard from a French minister say that we don't want to be pushed into fighting with the Russians over Nord Stream 2 just because America wants to do that. So the consensus on one point is clear, that they do not want a war. How do they want to go about ensuring that there is no war is still something that the Europeans are trying to figure out.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.